Nuestra bienvenida personal y virtual, ya que transmitimos en línea, en vivo por el portal del Recinto, a todos y todas a nuestra séptima presentación del ciclo de conferencias caribeñas que ofrecerá la doctora Elizabeth Manley sobre el tema Mothers and Mediators, las gobernadoras and the Politics of Conciliation in the Dominican Republic, 1966-1978. Queremos saludar a doña Patricia Manley, que está aquí en el público, la mamá de la ponente. Vale destacar que las conferencias caribeñas celebran su 10º aniversario. La primera se llevó a cabo en agosto de 2007 y desde entonces hemos organizado más de 260 eventos, lo que constituye un récord académico para este tipo de actividad sobre la región. También celebramos el 60º aniversario del Instituto de Estudios del Caribe, el IEC, establecido en 1958 y que desde entonces se ha destacado por la producción intelectual de sus investigadoras e investigadores, tales como Gordon Lewis, Thomas Matthews, los economistas Andic, Guillermo Baral, entre otros. En estos momentos, los investigadores son la profesora Ana Fabián y los doctores Félix Ojeda Reyes y Dil Matthews. El IEC tiene adscrito el Archivo del Caribe y Ciencias Sociales bajo la coordinación del doctor Juan Justi Cordero y publica desde el 61 la revista Caribeñas Estudios, la única del sistema UPR en base de datos importantes como JSTOR y Project News. Agradecemos el apoyo de nuestro personal no docente, Aleida Báez, Oscar Mendoza y Nanya Menéndez, aquí presentes. Las conferencias caribeñas son coauspiciadas por la oficina de la decana y también por la oficina del rector. La ponente de hoy, la doctora Manley, es profesora del Departamento de Historia de Xavier University en New Orleans, Louisiana, donde es profesora de temas caribeños y en este momento se encuentra en el IEC como investigadora visitante. Sus temas de investigación y docencia son la historia del Caribe, historia latinoamericana, género y estudios de la mujer, imperialismo europeo y postcolonialismo, transnacionalismo, derechos humanos y métodos de investigación. Obtuvo su doctorado de Tulane University con la tesis titulada Poner un grano de arena, Gender and Women's Political Participation Under Authoritarian Rule in the Dominican Republic, 1928-1978, que se convirtió en el libro de University of Florida Press, que aquí mostramos, y del cual sale la presentación de hoy. Es coeditora del volumen 2 de los 100 años de feminismo dominicano, 1930-1965, publicado por el Archivo General de la Nación de la República Dominicana en el 2014. Este mes ha estado en el IEC realizando investigación sobre un nuevo proyecto suyo, sobre la historia del turismo en Puerto Rico y otros países caribeños, su mercadeo, y estudia el aspecto sexual y de género del mismo, entre otras vertientes. Como comentarista nos complace contar con la doctora Luz del Alba, se me fue el apellido, Acevedo, perdón, Luz bendito, Luz del Alba Acevedo, una estudiosa del tema de poder político y género, que dicta cátedra en el Departamento de Ciencia Política de esta facultad. Tiene a su haber investigaciones y publicaciones sobre el tema, en particular un artículo sobre Sila Calderón en el libro Women in Caribbean Politics, editado por Cynthia Barrow Giles. Ha ganado becas de la National Science Foundation, la National Endowment for the Humanities y del Fondo Institucional para la Investigación, FIPI, de la Universidad. Y sin más preámbulos, le paso el micrófono a la doctora Manley, que será seguida por la doctora Acevedo, y luego pasamos a preguntas y comentarios del público. Les solicitamos que por favor apaguen sus celulares. Doctora Manley.
Muchas gracias, doctor. También quiero dar Mil gracias, Dr. García Muniz, para la bienvenida y para el apoyo del Centro de Estudios del Caribe, para la oportunidad a empezar mi proyecto nuevo sobre turismo. Ha sido como un buen empieza al proyecto aquí en Puerto Rico. Mañana me voy a Santo Domingo a seguir con el proyecto, pero también era para mí sumamente importante a visitar Puerto Rico después de María y saber, como residente de Nueva Orleans, saber un poco de lo que está pasando aquí en Puerto Rico. Y entonces, muchas gracias para la oportunidad de estar aquí y también por algunas conversaciones personales con algunos de ustedes. Buenos. Voy a hacer la ponencia en inglés, sería mucho mejor para ustedes y para mi mamá también. Pues empiezo. This talk that I'm going to give today is based on, as was noted, my recently released book, The Paradox of Paternalism, that came out last April. And was the result of over a decade of archival research in the Dominican Republic, as well as writing. It all began as my doctoral dissertation. The book charts women's participation in politics from the beginning of the Trujillo dictatorship through the end of the 12 años of Balaguer, and the rise of the 1970s feminist movement. What I was really interested in is how that movement in the 1970s happened after so many years of authoritarianism. The project itself sprang out of a fascination with the level of political awareness I was seeing among women in the 1960s as I was looking at a small nonprofit project of providing school lunches in the Dominican Republic. The ability of these poor country mothers to write to the government and request what they needed, their ability to massage political bureaucracy was fascinating to me, and I wanted to dig deeper into the gendered world of dictatorial politics, which is what this book does, both for Trujillo, which has been much studied, although mostly along masculine lines, and the subsequent years of the rule of Joaquin Balaguer. It was no small effort to read against the archives, as they say, to discover materials that have to do with women and women's involvement in politics. Particularly enlightening was that what I found was that as they worked to gain enfranchisement or demonstrate their usefulness to either Trujillo or Balaguer, they were crucial in the maintenance and destabilization of these very entrenched regimes. Right now, I'm going to focus on what I find to be one of the most fascinating elements of this story, which is that of Joaquin Balaguer's, during his 12 years of rule, the 12 años, decision to appoint only women as governors in each and every one of the 26 provinces of the Dominican Republic. An unprecedented decision globally, not just in the Dominican Republic, but a decision that has generally been dismissed by scholars and historians, or referred to as window dressing or something not terribly important or worthy of study. However, it was really quite fascinating. Generally, I give a little bit of a background to how Balaguer becomes president of the Dominican Republic for 12 years. I will kind of go over this quickly, as I am sure most of you are very aware of the politics of the early 20th century in the Caribbean. But much like here, the early 20th century in the Dominican Republic is marked by much U.S. intervention, including a 8-year occupation from 1916 to 1924, which helped usher into power a young upstart of the National Guard, also put in place by the U.S. occupation, named Rafael Trujillo, or Rafael Leonidas Trujillo Molina. The accepted narrative is that he came into power and ruled with an iron fist for 31 years. While that is true, and Trujillo's rule was many things, including violent, he also managed to incorporate a large number of people into his bureaucracy, including more middle-class individuals than had previously been involved in government, and many, many women. As you'll see in this bottom left picture, women came out en masse to support his kind of public manifestations and events celebrating his wonderfulness, usually, and demonstrating their support for him. But that support didn't just happen, right? He began courting the women's movement, the early feminist movement that had sprung up in the 20s, in the very first years of his regime. In 1931, he recognized this early feminist group, a group called the Acción Feminista Dominicana, and gave them the formal stamp of approval. And those who were willing at any rate, continued to work with him until the granting of suffrage and beyond. Suffrage was granted in 1942. Women also became part of the official Dominican Party, participated in social assistance programs, and were very much part of how he maintained his rule throughout the 30 years. These women, many of these women, also worked to advance their own careers to high-level political posts. Under Trujillo, the regime boasted often to the world, if possible, the first female senators, congresswomen, governors, and mayors throughout the country, as well as the first female representative to the United Nations and to UNICEF, and the president of the Inter-American Commission for Women, all three of those positions held by a woman named Minerva Bernardino, who was much detested in Dominican history for her compliance with the dictator. But all these first were something that the regime trotted out, but the women themselves also used to advance their own careers and establish and protect their own families during the Trujillato. However, as I mentioned, women were also important in overthrowing the regime and destabilizing the regime. In an article in the Americas, as well as a chapter in this book, I talk about the intimate violations that the regime began committing in the late 40s and early 50s against by persecuting, torturing, disappearing dissidents, going after families, attacking the kind of moral Dominican family that he himself had held up as the lodestar of the regime, even if everyone knew it was kind of a falsity. And that public attack on individuals became the mobilizing point for the resistance. And I argue that women were a key part of that. Of course, the murder of the Mirabal sisters in 1960 was the beginning of the end, as everyone kind of recognizes. But the story is much deeper in that many of these violations that were happening dug into the very gendered and violated the many gendered kind of structures that the regime itself had set up and mobilized people to fight against the regime, which, as we know, ended when assassins killed Trujillo along the seaside highway, the Malecon, in May 30th, 1961. Following the end of the Trujillato, women continued to engage, as we see in these top, the right-hand side pictures, in the politics that followed the ajusticiamiento, the end of the Trujillo regime. They particularly demanded a return of the moral and stable and safe Dominican family through activism and protest. They continued to protest the exile of their loved ones up in the top right corner, and they were crucial in the ultimate resistance movement in 1965 against yet another U.S. occupation, when Lyndon Johnson sent thousands of Marines fearing a communist takeover, what was really just an attempt to return the constitutional president, Juan Bosch, to power. And women were very active in that revolution as well. On the back of the book, there's a picture of a wedding that happened during that period. That is one of my favorite images. But women were also sort of present as trainers in the military army that was developed as all sorts of different kinds of support and activist roles. So all of this sets up what will come in 1966, which is the election of this man, Joaquin Balaguer. Balaguer had been, of course, the right-hand man of Trujillo since basically the beginning of the regime. He served as a speechwriter, as pretty much anything Trujillo wanted or needed, and was intimately involved in all of the machinations of the regime. So it is referred, this period, this 12-year period from 1966 to 1978 is referred to as the 12 años, but also a period of continuismo, dictatorship light, if you will. Like Trujillo, Balaguer depended on the involvement of women in politics to keep and support his regime, but he did it in somewhat different ways. And it results in a slightly different kind of maternal politics that I'm really interested in. While campaigning, he spoke directly to mothers. Often he talked about how he would bring them peace, how he would bring them into, what did he call it, la plaza pública, to bring their voices into the public discussion and to help create calm and peaceful stability for the Dominican Republic. So once he secured his position as president, and I won't go into the details of whether that was a fully, fairly democratic process, let's say not, once he secured his position as president, he did actually follow through on some of his promises, at least in his eyes, to bring women into public politics. The biggest, he appointed many women to a number of different posts, but the biggest move was this decision to appoint only women as provincial governors. Every single province, all 26, had a woman appointed to rule over state affairs. Now, this may have been a tactic. Yes, probably a tactic. It may have been an effort to demonstrate how progressive the Dominican Republic was. Yes, also true. But these women who assumed their roles took it seriously. They didn't see it as window dressing or some sort of ploy for popularity. They really felt as though they had a job, and a serious job, to bring conciliation, to bring mediation to the Dominican Republic, which, of course, there was lots of discord at this point, following 30 years of dictatorship, U.S. intervention, and some real struggles over the direction of the country. So they come into their position with a real degree of seriousness. They're really ready to do some work, even if ill-prepared to do so. On the left here, you can see an image of the naming, the nombramiento, of each and every governor in 1966. It was listed in the paper upon Balaguer's announcement. Balaguer really made this unprecedented move to try to help what he argued, at any rate, to bring conciliation to the provinces, to bring his message out into the countryside, into the rural populations, and he felt that the women were the ones that could do this, or at least publicly that's what he said. While the materials that I found on these women were multifaceted, and there are many, and in fact I could probably write an entire book just on them alone, I am going to focus on two particular things here. The first was how they were viewed and how they operated as what Balaguer termed the vehicles of conciliation in the provinces, and the other was how they sought to project themselves as these progressive democratic faces for this regime that was supposed to be post-dictatorial, moving past 30 years of dictatorship. Those, for me, were two very important points, and I'm going to focus on them here. I invite you to take a look at this image. It's not the best quality. I would love if the New York Times would find this picture for me, or at least in Diario, or any of them from which I've tried to find it. But this did, in fact, appear in the New York Times in 1971 in a special pullout section on the Dominican Republic, sort of come to the Dominican Republic, invest in the Dominican Republic. And on the first page was this image. Look, we appointed only women to serve as governors in each and every one of the provinces. The other thing, and I'm not sure if you can read this from where you are, but the caption under this picture says, one of the many firsts. The Dominican Republic was first to liberate women's lib. Okay. Besides being a potentially bad translation, I think that there is a very useful metaphor here that I will come back to after I talk a little bit about what these women actually did, right? One of the questions that I get most often when I mention this, if I get a question, if I'm talking to Dominican historians, I often get, they didn't do anything. It was just for show. Well, I actually found that they did more, but when people are interested, they normally say, gosh, who were these women? Where did they come from? Who were they? And I was able to interview a few of them. I don't know them all intimately, but I did get a sense of the group. So all were established members of their community, well respected in their community. Many were encantadora, beloved within their kind of provinces. They were from known Balaguerista families, all from the Partido Reformista of Balaguer. Altogether, of the pool of 48, because some of them changed over the years, 48 altogether, 8 were doctors, more than 1/5 were teachers. Nearly all of them were married or widowed. There was 1 or 2 single women. Overall, they were women of comfortable economic means and relatively high levels of education. Many had lived in the capital, Santo Domingo, for a time and received a college education at La UAST. And others had also spent significant amounts of time in classrooms or other educational centers. In other words, lots of teachers. They represented these middle to upper class families living in provincial capitals of their respective provinces, and they took their appointments very seriously. They quickly adopted the regime's rhetoric, whether or not, most of them hadn't been terribly enmeshed in politics, but they took on the rhetoric and the discourse very quickly, and they wanted to serve as mediators. They didn't know why Balaguer appointed them, but they wanted to do a good job. And there are interviews with them from the very earliest years, and they were all very honored to take this position and felt that they had something to offer. When they first commented, and really throughout their regimes, they talk about how they wanted to fulfill their jobs as highly non-partisan. They were not Balaguerista in this position. They were trying to serve their constituents, and that their style of politics would be very different than what you would see from men. That they came to politics with something altogether different. And this was very reminiscent of a phrase that I saw in the 30s and 40s of the Trujillista women who talked about el freno suave, the smooth break of politics that they would come and bring. They thought they had something new to bring to politics. And I think that they did in their own way. The governor of San Pedro de Macorís said that she hoped to, quote, open the doors of government to all without regard to political party. Another outside commentator noted that these were not women doing men's jobs. These were women doing the jobs better by being women. Right? So this is how they're kind of envisioning their place in a very masculinized world of politics. So what is interesting here is that while on the one hand, the regime is kind of portraying them as these docile, conciliatory, apartisan selections, their success ended up depending on them being both partisan and highly politicized, because they had to work in this world. The reams, literally reams of correspondence they produced over the course of their tenures indicate that they struggled in a world of male-dominated politics. But they persisted and ultimately constructed a feminine politics that they deemed appropriate for their roles as wives and mothers. And they were able to make demands on the regime that reminded Balaguer of his indebtedness, of his initial promises to women during campaigning for, Dominican women. However, they also demonstrated that they were equally adept at inserting themselves in the masculinized world of male politics and serving as the political go-betweens for their constituents in the provinces and the national government. And I'll give you, in a little bit, I'll give you a couple of examples of that I find particularly compelling. Many pictures, I found many pictures, they're not all the best quality, but hopefully it gives you a little bit of a sense of the kinds of things both the newspapers reported on and they desired to show to their superiors. And this one is the governor of La Romana in Abate, a sugar plantation. I'm not sure what she was doing, whether there was clothing distribution or some sort of social project. I actually met this governor and she was fascinating. I interviewed her. She was in the position for all 12 years and, a staunch Balaguer supporter. Just a small side note, and I think this is really important. I was particularly interested in kind of sharing this with students, but the persistence needed sometimes to look for women's history is really crucial here. I asked for the files of these women governors for approximately 6 months, regularly, weekly, sometimes daily. I was told, oh, we don't know where they are. They may not be in the deposito where they're supposed to be. Oh, they're really not. They're not really valuable. You don't really want to see them. And I just kept asking and asking and asking and looking at other things and asking until finally, one of the archivists was like, fine, come with me. We'll go look. And I was able to look with him and find them, which resulted in about 4 or 5 feet of correspondence that really tells this amazing story that I get to tell here, that I think I will continue to get to tell because it's so nuanced and gives us a whole nother perspective on the Balaguer regime. So it's really doing women's history and gender history can be challenging, but worth digging in there to find some of these stories. So in terms of what these women were empowered to do, I will say was very limited, right? The principal duty of a provincial governor, according to a 1950 law that was established under the Trujillato, was to serve as a representative of the executive branch within the province. They were to ensure compliance with the Constitution and the laws of the Republic, contribute to the maintenance of public order. These are almost sort of direct quotes. watch over other local officials, organize provincial celebrations for national holidays, woohoo, and inform the executive branch of what's going on in the provinces, right? They were allowed to make recommendations for improvements, although no promises as to what might come of that. And they were given very few resources to complete this job, i.e. no budget to speak of, no exclusive budget. They were given little streams of things for this or that project, but they had no exclusive budget, which is also why people dismiss it and say, oh, well, that position, it really has no power. They kind of found ways to create power, which is what I find fascinating. They were also given all these menial jobs. Like, one of their jobs was to collect, and transmit the attendance rolls for the local movie theaters, right? Don't know why this was important. It was important, or it was a holdover from Trujillo, but they had many of these little jobs that they kept doing, and they refused to give up. Even when they had to keep asking for money and begging for things and really, facing some difficult challenges. They continued to ask for more money. That was the biggest thing I saw. They wanted more money, more resources. They didn't seem to complain about their measly incomes and probably didn't need them. But they kept reminding upper level officials of their importance as these vehicles of conciliation. They found outside sources of funding, they cobbled together different things, and they just kept at it, which is the persistence that they had was, really impressive to me. So at the local level, their most visible arena, their work was as conciliators. Promising transparent hiring, emphasizing concerns of rural citizens, regardless of what party they were from, and most importantly, pushing the need for local economic development. This was crucial. They link this in to their commitment to democracy, that development and democracy went hand in hand. And so they start focusing immediately in on local needs. Schools, roads, dams, potable water, electrical supply, office supplies for their offices, transportation, communication. These are their immediate and most persistent needs. And they send requests initially to the Secretary of the Interior, but eventually, when they're not hearing anything, straight to Balaguer himself, right? And this is kind of really fascinating because they were told on numerous occasions that they were not to write to Balaguer directly. That was not the chain of command. And they generally just disregarded it and wrote to their friend and colleague, right? All the letters are very, very intimate that they write, and they write directly to him, and they ignore all the missives that say, you're not to write to Balaguer. They write directly to him because they want him to pay attention. Their issues range from the quotidian demographics, appointments, office supplies, to much more complex inquiries into political intrigue, party strategy, agrarian land reform even. And they are regularly inserting themselves in this world of masculine politics. As we see here, again, I have many... Doña V from La Romana was very photogenic, apparently, and she was often seen in the newspaper, and so many of the images I have of her. But again, here's this picture of her with the National Police, and so women were often inserting themselves in these very masculinized context. But they continue to focus in on the needs of their local constituents and to emphasize how important it was that Balaguer attend to them. That if he did not attend to them, right, and they don't say it explicitly, but if he does not attend to them, he may lose the support. The party may lose the support. He may lose the vote of these people, that it was crucial that he continue the clientelistic politics of attending to the local need. And they were really crucial kind of reminders of this because they knew what was going on the ground. They were very in touch with all of the issues that their people were dealing with. I think it's also worth pointing out that one of their most, I said that 1/5 were educators, right? It was really important to them to focus in on areas of education. And they were constantly kind of, I use the word harping, but they were constantly harping on the importance of education as the most essential tool at their disposal. They were a crucial platform. Education was a crucial platform for them as mediators. And so despite really scarce funds for education, they continue to push the national government for more resources for educational needs. The governor of La Romana, again, wrote in 1965 in her annual report that many of the 5,000 children of school age in her province starved for the, quote, bread of education due to the physical deficiencies of the buildings and resources. And she made sure to place blame on the appropriate officials. Who was not listening to her? Who was not forwarding the request? Who was holding up or holding back funds? These governors were also attending to local strikes, to disputes within schools, and they were also then relaying this to the national government and reminding them that this was how the future citizens, the future men of the Dominican Republic were forged, were created. So it was important both to attend to this and to prevent the discord that happened when you didn't attend to them. They also took on issues like recreational sports, which may have seemed trivial to some, but to them were important. Requesting, uniforms and equipment and reconditioning of local fields because they said, here's where the resistance, here's where the discord is often happening. And so they made sure to focus on what, in quote, the physical and mental health of the Dominican youth. And in all of this correspondence, they continue to remind the federal government and their dear friend Balaguer the loyalty of the community, the relatively small nature of their requests, and the benefits of this kind of growth and development to the nation, to its image, and to the regime and staying in power. They created this link, particularly in education, very intentionally. They saw that they had a closer connection with issues of motherhood education, and they wanted to demonstrate that this was their particular field of play. And there was a number of incidences in which a governor wouldn't get invited to a meeting that was within the realm of education or youth sports, and you would see these indignant letters. I was not invited to this. Why? Where is my formal invitation? This was their particularly strong area. I mean, they were fairly aggressive in all areas, but this was particularly important to them. But as I said, they constantly are reminding the regime of the importance of attending to these issues for the survival of the party. And almost to the point of veiled threat. For example, in 1967, one of the governors suggested the implementation of a proposed agrarian project, and she enumerates the political advantages of this project, and she reminds them of that this is an important reward for a hardworking peasantry. They had demonstrated their strength and valor, and they deserved this. So this kind of language. She says that, they have shown that they deserve this upon filling the polls with the reform vote when called upon to elect the man that should decide their destiny, right? So they're voting for Balaguer, so he should be returning in kind the favor. They also continued to focus on many other needs of the party, scaring a lot of party officials by saying, look, if you don't attend to these things, you may lose the overall support, not just the Balaguer vote, but the vote for the entire party. And they very quickly, like I mentioned earlier, picked up the party rhetoric. They talk about the revolución sin sangre, la familia dominicana, a spirit of cooperation, harmony, and understanding, enemigo del orden público, and lifting these phrases from party discourse to really drive home their point and get the things that they needed for their constituents. They were also finally not above nagging, right? And repeated and direct appeals for the things that they needed. And I remember one particular case, trivial as it may have been, but in, I think it was La Estrelleta, the communication system, the telegraph was not working, and the woman, and I can't remember how she conveys her message, she must have written 7 or 8 times. She's like, yeah, it's not working still. I'm getting you this message. I could really, and you know, it moves into sarcasm and it continues until finally her problem is resolved, right? So they were not above repeatedly asking for the same thing to get what they wanted. Finally, they were very cognizant, these women governors, of their role as the public face of progress and democracy. They made this clear through their actions in a number of different ways. They were frequently featured in the press as they attended to inaugurations, local events. This was really important element of Balaguer's attempt to kind of contend with Cold War politics and communist threat by demonstrating, look, these women, they are the proof of democracy and progressiveness. They write again and again to the national government, reminding them of how they're attending to local needs, sending pictures, like the one previous of the governor of La Romana. Look, we're doing this, we're making a show, we're showing up in the provinces, we're showing up for all sorts of people throughout the provinces, and we're really, you know, proving that the party is doing the kinds of work that it's supposed to be throughout the province. I mean, this is an opening of an amusement park in Barahona, right? And so, you know, not a hugely important event, but again, a demonstration that these women were everywhere and constantly demonstrating themselves as this public face of the new progressive, non-dictatorial Balaguer regime. Despite their best efforts, they were often met with direct challenges, and this is some of the juiciest elements in their correspondence, when they really begin to be challenged by people that were either not of the party or not pleased with women being appointed to the positions of governors. Complaint letters accused them of wrongdoings ranging from unscrupulous political behavior to former involvement in the prostitution business or continued present involvement in the prostitution business. These challenges to their authority and their responding defense of themselves and their constituents demonstrated this contested political space of the 12 años and the ways in which the governors tried to create a new space for themselves and a new kind of politics. I'm going to give a few examples just because I think they're fascinating. In the Southwest, in a place, Pedernales, I believe, the governor, Ana Valentina Roa de Moreta, who was part of the initial group of women who were appointed, faced some political and personal challenges in June of 1969 when a local man came to her house, attacked and physically threatened her. She writes to Balaguer directly and says what had happened. He came to her door, he shoved her to the ground, and he said, "You despicable woman, I have come to kill you." He does not kill you, but the attacker was identified as the brother of a congressman who was had also been sending her threatening letters. They were not happy with her being in this position. Unclear exactly why. Could have been a number of things. And they are trying to discredit her work for the party. Again, whether it's that she worked for Balaguer or that she was a female or both is unclear. It happens again a couple times. She tries to resign. She's convinced to stay. But eventually she does resign because she can't take it anymore. She's one of the few that gave up, but she holds on for quite some time despite someone coming to her house and threatening to kill her. Another case, one that I happen to like a lot, it happened in Nagua, where someone else comes to the house of a governor and threatens to kill her, and all sorts of vulgar language. A kind of dispute breaks out. There were other people there, and the governor pulls out a gun and shoots it in the air, and is like, enough with this discussion. You know, many of the governors often wrote about how they were disdainful of a lot of the bawdy and drunken things that happened among male politicians in their provinces, but they were certainly, in this case, not above pulling out a gun, a firearm, to end the discussion. Other women who held these positions had to defend themselves personally. Alejandrina Domanche de Magne had to, while arguing that she was an honest and decent woman, was being humiliated and insulted by a number of people within her province. She wrote to the governor, to the President Balaguer, to complain about this, apparently these attacks were coming fairly regularly in letter form, not physically, but at least in letter form, defaming her person and the work that she'd been doing. The final example, I think it's the most egregious, but it is one in which the newly appointed governor in San Juan de la Maguana in 1970 is accused of being a meretriz, a prostitute. And at the inauguration, many of the groups, the Lions Club and the Rotary, say they're not coming because this woman is involved in the prostitution business and they couldn't possibly support her. And what ensues is an extended campaign that she submits on her behalf, trying to reclaim her sense of honor. So these women faced a number of challenges, and despite working really hard on a regular basis for what they believed. Now, granted, I know they were not working for everyone, and they certainly would have labeled resistors to Balaguer troublemakers, but they did indeed work very hard for the things that they viewed as important to their provinces. And given the challenges that they face in this effort to create a new form of local politics, I think the importance of their work lies less in their individual accomplishments or failures, but rather their collective success as women as politicians, women in significant political roles, in creating a space for themselves in the arena of Balaguerista politics, a place that was neither fully feminized nor devoid of typical gender expectations. They enabled more women, other women beyond them, to bring a sense of the domestic into the political. Yet, rather than merely replicating their domestic personas in public spaces, the women governors demonstrated that their roles were more malleable. They were more flexible than many had believed. And their positions were integral to keeping the Balaguer machine alive. And he would do the same thing when he comes back into office in the 80s. So clearly it was an important and successful technique. These all-female appointees were unprecedented in the way that they challenged local political dynamics and at the same time did not assume to act like male politicians. They created a new model. Despite the challenges that they faced, including efforts to label them mentally unstable or prostitutes, they pushed forward to create a new style of maternal politics. They executed their duties, committed to local concerns, without losing focus on the things that they thought were traditionally feminine and maternal. They addressed issues that came before them, cognizant of what was needed at a local level and a global level, as well as to kind of, you know, the image of the Dominican Republic. In challenges to their authority, they acted on some established gendered codes, but in other ways kind of subverted them altogether. And they defended their right to be a politician in this period and in these places in ways that subverted previous understandings of maternal politics, of women's politics, of politics in general. And they went beyond the expectations and up till now the understanding of the fatherly protections offered by Balaguer. The two main successes, I think, of these governors were to serve as mediators and to demonstrate the nation's progressive, quote unquote, progressive democracy to the world, allowed them to create a new model of maternalist politics. This new maternalism relied on the legacies of the Trujillato, for good or ill, but was also built on many of the challenges they faced in their time as governors. And it was double-edged, right? It allowed them to come into these positions and see and bring more other women into politics, but it also was antithetical to an assertion of full gender equity, because they brought with them this idea that they did something slightly different, something more maternal. And this, in some ways, is an issue that continues to plague the Dominican feminist movement into the current, the inability to fully achieve full gendered equity before the law is a continued struggle of the Dominican feminist movement. So I want to go back to the New York Times image and the phrase, "first to liberate women's lib," right? We see that this is a phrase that, of course, was lost in translation. But it also highlights kind of the core of the regime's gender politics, right? In freeing women from the radicalism of Western feminism, right, liberating them from women's lib, Balaguer facilitated a space for women to participate in politics as maternal peacemakers, right? Those peacemakers that he needed to smooth over a very turbulent period, very difficult and discordant provincial conditions. They were the ones who served as that go-between, and he created a space for that they filled admirably and incredibly. But it also created a rather limiting frame as to what women in politics could do that continue to have a legacy, right? That, you know, large numbers of women within the political sphere, but sometimes limitations on what those women, how they were able to project themselves as politicians. And so I think that paradigm, that paradox, is something that I continue to struggle with, and is kind of a through line in the book, but one that is at the crux of any understanding of women's political history. And I think I'll just leave it at that, and thank you. Let's see.
Ahora llamamos al podio a la doctora Luz del Alba Acevedo para un comentario.
Gracias por invitarme, especialmente le doy las gracias al Instituto de Estudios del Caribe y los felicito por los 60 años que cumplen, y estoy bien honrada de participar en este ciclo de conferencias que es el aniversario número 10. Así que me honra, y además me honra la oportunidad que tuve de leer con detenimiento lo que es el capítulo 4 de la autora de Elizabeth Manley. Yo tengo 2 o 3 puntitos, vamos a ver si nos da tiempo para desarrollarlo. Yo voy a estar presentando, mi voz no viene de la historia, sino que viene de mi lectura como cientista política de esta historiografía. A mí me parece que la historiografía de las gobernadoras de la República Dominicana que nos presenta la doctora Manley es un estudio bien minucioso que documenta la incorporación de las mujeres en las estructuras formales del Estado, y me parece excelente, un trabajo muy, muy rico que nos invita a reflexionar sobre el pasado y sobre el presente. Así que hay muchas más de las paradojas ahí en ese libro. Eso es lo que lo hace, ¿verdad? Interesante, intrigante, me parece a mí. Primeramente, los actores políticos femeninos que tradicionalmente se mantienen invisibles en la historia. Son las protagonistas en la relación de género y Estado que se examina en esta historia. Esto es importante porque el estudio de la política casi siempre se centra en examinar y analizar el Estado, las políticas públicas o las relaciones entre Estados, las relaciones internacionales. En este sentido, en la ciencia política tradicional, las mujeres parecen estar ausentes o invisibles en muchas ocasiones de los estudios de la política, en tanto que relativamente muy pocas mujeres han sido jefas de Estado, como gobernadoras, como alcaldesas en todos los niveles, gobernadoras, alcaldesas, etcétera. Estas están ahí y están esperando ser descubiertas por los historiadores y más adelante ser analizadas por los cientistas políticos. En el caso de la ciencia política, pues usualmente utilizamos el género o la participación de la política como una mera variable, que en muchos casos no es la variable que se está explicando, sino que se pone como un efecto residual. Y eso a mí me parece problemático, eso está ausente de este trabajo, aunque es un trabajo, ¿verdad?, distinto. La persistencia de la subrepresentación de las mujeres en la política evidencia que estas siguen siendo vistas como una actividad de hombres en un mundo de hombres, en un espacio especialmente masculinizado. Desde esta visión del mundo, las mujeres siguen teniendo una presencia marginal en la política. El trabajo que nos presenta la doctora Manley hace visible precisamente a 26 mujeres designadas por el presidente de la República Dominicana, Joaquín Balaguer, para ejercer la función de gobernadoras provinciales entre el 1966 y 1978. A mí me parece que es interesante anotar que para la década del 60, que es la década donde inicia este periodo que cubre el estudio de la doctora Manley, se ofrecen en Puerto Rico cursos de liderato auspiciados por la Comisión Interamericana de Mujeres de la OEA en Puerto Rico en esa misma década, ¿verdad? Es precisamente donde se encuentran 10 alcaldesas que ocupando las posiciones, y estas son electas, ¿ok? Son alcaldesas. No estoy comparando las alcaldesas con los gobernadores, son dos sistemas políticos distintos. Pero a mí me parece que el punto es interesante, ahí hay alguito que debemos, ¿verdad?, explorar, porque yo quisiera saber, primeramente se menciona que esos cursos inclusive se ofrecían en la Universidad de Puerto Rico. me gustaría saber si las gobernadoras dominicanas que participaron de estos proyectos internacionales y vinieron a Puerto Rico, si en esos espacios las alcaldesas de los 60 en Puerto Rico coincidieron en esos espacios. Eso es una curiosidad, ¿verdad? Por ahí lo dejo, no sé. El trabajo que nos presenta en ese sentido la doctora Manley revela las formas en que el Estado autoritario incorpora a las mujeres en el proceso de gobernanza y de legitimación del poder político partidista. Para su excelencia, el presidente Balaguer, las mujeres eran las guardianas de la nación, algo que tú ahorita mencionabas son los vehículos de la conciliación. También ella tiene otras metáforas interesantísimas, ¿verdad? Como las guardianas de la nación. Y eso es importante, porque según él, son las mujeres, son las capaces de dirimir los conflictos. Eso es lo que está detrás de ahí, ¿verdad? Son capaces de dirimir conflictos entre visiones, entre posiciones adversas, entre proyectos de desarrollo económico, etcétera. Así que es bien interesante que estas mujeres, ¿verdad? Según la perspectiva, pienso yo, lo que interpreto, de Balaguer, ahí hay una noción de la mujer que va a negociar una madeja de complicaciones que yo creo que el Estado no está, ¿verdad? Muy seguro de que quisiera desatar esa madeja. Así que es mejor que las mujeres mantengan la paz en ese sentido. Las mujeres se convierten, son importantes porque ellas son las que van a mantener no solamente la paz, el orden público y la directriz del Estado en aquellas provincias bajo las cuales ellas son las titulares. O sea, así que en ese sentido eso es bien importante porque van a estar impulsando cuáles son los imperativos del Estado en esas provincias en particular. Nombrar mujeres a la posición de gobernadoras de provincia le servía al Estado de pantalla democrática, creo yo, para un país en transición política bajo la mirilla internacional. De ahí que la socióloga política Rosario Espinal, refiriéndose a los nombramientos que hizo Balaguer de 26 gobernadoras, señalaba, y cito, que lo hizo por ser un presidente de la vieja ultranza, que veía en las mujeres conservadurismo y una figura más fácil de mantener, quizás, bajo su dominio. El énfasis del quizás es mío porque me parece que al leer la historiografía de Manley, ese quizás empieza a coger, ¿verdad?, una sustancia y una importancia bien importante, que no se lo estoy atribuyendo a Rosario Espinal, ¿verdad? Okay. Para la doctora Manley, el Estado incorporó a las mujeres a estas posiciones políticas usando un discurso maternalista, basándose en los roles tradicionales asignados a estas y apelando a una supuesta superioridad moral de las mujeres. Por eso era que eran las guardianas, ¿verdad?, de la nación. En el ejercicio de sus funciones, las gobernadoras polarían los roles domésticos y maternales a la esfera pública, pero siempre que se pasa esto, no es que las mujeres van al espacio público y hacen las mismas cosas que le hacían en la casa. Lo que pasa es que esa es la base de la cual parten para entonces acercarse a la actividad que van a hacer en ese espacio público. Y en el caso de las gobernadoras en la República Dominicana, estas estaban desarrollando empatías. Claro, las empatías es algo que se le atribuye también a las mujeres más que a los hombres, ¿verdad? Son mucho más empáticas, especialmente para las cosas de el nitty-gritty, las cosas pequeñas, ¿verdad? ¿Qué es lo que tú necesitas? Las necesidades. Y en ese sentido, estas mujeres, al transferir esos supuestos roles domésticos y maternales que le asigna tradicionalmente la sociedad, lo que hace es que desarrollan unas grandes empatías con las necesidades de los ciudadanos locales de lo que ellas están viendo, y es interesante, no había visto las fotos, pero una de las fotografías que presenta la doctora aquí, donde esta gobernadora está repartiendo algo, y no se ve muy bien qué es lo que es, pero es interesante ver cómo esos son proyectos de donde hay una gran empatía, participo, veo cuál es la necesidad, cuál es la angustia, etcétera, y entonces tienen la capacidad de traducirla y de elevarla a las estructuras más altas del sistema político. Claro, ¿cuán importante era esto para la estructura política? Pues ustedes vieron todo el problema que pasaban las gobernadoras. Esta es a su vez, o sea, ellas transmiten, se identifican con los ciudadanos y tratan de buscar el apoyo, la solidaridad, de alguna forma el apoyo en recursos económicos, porque estas no tienen presupuesto, etcétera, para poder hacer todas las cosas que ellas han identificado como los intereses locales, los intereses de sus ciudadanos. Los estilos femeninos que utilizan en la mediación de lo local y lo nacional, contribuían a mantener la paz. Las gobernadoras son conceptualizadas aquí como unas madres mediadoras, correcto, madres mediadoras. Un rol típico de las mujeres en las familias matrifocales del Caribe. Ahí me remonto a los estudios de Helen Safá, antropóloga, así que es interesante esto. Como delegadas, si el relato histórico, sin embargo, se quedara, ¿verdad?, aquí, las mujeres estarían representadas en la política como unas víctimas y su agencia política se quedaría prisionera de la compleja relación entre género y Estado. Pero, reconociendo las dinámicas de género en la política, que es lo que entiendo es una gran contribución del trabajo, reconociendo esas dinámicas de género en la política, la doctora Manley hace otra revelación, ¿verdad? Descubre las formas en que las gobernadoras utilizaron su posición para insertarse y participar en organizaciones internacionales que le permitieron adelantar sus agendas y sus intereses, tanto individuales como colectivos. Eso les gana un montón de reconocimiento y en la política reconocimiento es importante. Así que ahí empieza a complicarse esta dinámica, ¿verdad? Estas no son las víctimas únicamente, estas no son las meras guardianas morales de la nación. O sea, esa es la perspectiva del mandatario, pero estas transforman en su quehacer político, van transformando esas visiones y hay ganancias personales y hay ganancias colectivas para los ciudadanos de sus provincias. Como delegadas a organismos internacionales, participaron de escuelas políticas que contribuyeron a desarrollar sus capacidades de liderato, de negociación, de gobernanza democrática. ¿Ya? Vienen las complejidades aquí. Y esas son unas destrezas que algunas de ellas utilizaron, bien interesante, para más adelante lanzarse a otras actividades en el proceso político, como ejemplo participar en los procesos electorales. Y a mí parece que eso es una plataforma bien importante. La historiografía de la incorporación de las mujeres a las estructuras formales del Estado demuestra que la relación entre el Estado y el género debe ser entendida desde una multiplicidad de factores, incluyendo las consideraciones de la política pública, así como el cálculo político de los intereses de los mandatarios. Y ahí es que está esa complejidad que se ilustra en este trabajo. Este trabajo hace definitivamente una contribución a la literatura de la participación y representación de las mujeres en los regímenes autoritarios en transición. Aparte de este comentario general, yo quisiera traer a la consideración tres argumentos distintos para que me surgen a mí sobre las lecciones que las historias de las gobernadoras sugieren. Estos puntos se resumen en, primero, mujer y poder, esa relación. Segundo, el modelo de maternidad. Y tercero, otros ejes de la identidad de género, como lo son la clase y la raza. Primero, la relación entre mujer y poder. Mujer y poder. Las mujeres pueden ser incorporadas a las estructuras formales del Estado. Pueden participar en los procesos políticos formales. Lo vemos. Pero en el ejercicio de sus funciones están limitadas en el uso del poder. Cuando me cuestiono esto, no es que no tengan poder, porque lo interesante que se transpira de esta historia de las gobernadoras es que en la ausencia de un poder que emana del presupuesto y de poder tomar decisiones sobre cómo voy a distribuir los recursos limitados en una población que necesita tantas cosas, parques, escuelas, hospitales, educación, etcétera, ellas consiguen, utilizando esas estrategias femeninas o maternales, crear un poder alterno. Que no es tan fuerte. Bueno, eso son materias ¿verdad? Para analizar más adelante. Pero ahí hay un elemento que a mí me parece bien importante. En este caso, si bien es cierto que hay un avance en la participación y la representación política de las mujeres en el gobierno, estas son incorporadas a posiciones formales de poco poder, ¿okay? Como el cargo de las gobernadoras de provincia. ¿Cuánto poder tenían estas gobernadoras? ¿Era esto un trabajo burocrático al servicio de la política partidista? La narrativa indica que hacían el trabajo que yo podría caracterizar en ocasiones como el propio de un secretariado político. De hecho, en la historia reciente de la República Dominicana se cuestiona para qué tener, en este caso tienen ahora 32 gobernadores de provincia nombrados por el presidente para representar el poder ejecutivo en los diversos territorios. Eso es un cuestionamiento a muchas voces y a pocas voces, ¿verdad? Porque se habla mucho entre los cientistas políticos, pero a nivel de la política, eso no se quiere revertir por las razones que veremos. Estos nombramientos responden al clientelismo político, cuya función es esencialmente asistencialista. No son oficiales electos, carecen de un presupuesto asignado por ley y responden al Ministerio del Interior y la Policía. Claro, hay que hacer una observación. Se supone que las gobernadoras presidieran, ¿verdad?, el Consejo de Desarrollo Regional y Provincial, donde se va a discutir, ¿verdad?, la implantación de los proyectos económicos de su provincia. Segundo punto. El trabajo se enmarca en el modelo de maternalismo político que introduce Elsa Chani en su libro Las Supermadres, la mujer dentro de la política en la América Latina. El maternalismo político se define como todo tipo de actuación que las mujeres organizan o hacen y se justifican bajo el lema de la maternidad o bajo la bandera de somos madres, ¿verdad? Y eso pues es una gran fuerza, las motiva a hacer esto. Esta actuación puede ser a todos los niveles, al nivel local, municipal, regional, a todos los niveles. Es decir, el maternalismo político es una ideología en tanto que habla de las creencias que tenemos sobre los roles femeninos, como también es una estrategia política de movilización que rompe con la dicotomía de lo público-privado o de casa a calle, ¿verdad?, como más o menos lo utilizamos. Sin embargo, utilizando este modelo, para el estudio de la participación política en la América Latina se han identificado varias formas de actuación política femenina. Mire, van desde las madres subversivas, las madres militares, las madres rebeldes, la madre pública, las madres políticas y la madre colectiva. Con el estudio de la doctora Manley tenemos las madres mediadoras. Así que añadimos a eso una contribución más a ese modelo y cómo ese modelo se ha ido transformando en la medida en que se van haciendo más investigaciones utilizando, ¿verdad?, las mismas nociones. Para las feministas, este enfoque, no obstante, sirve para reforzar los principios retrógrados, reaccionarios, como los quiera decir, del patriarcado. O sea y asume que el destino de las mujeres es lo que popularmente se conoce criadero, cocina y culto. Cría a los muchachos, alimenta a los niños y ve a la iglesia. Okay. Para otras mujeres y otras organizaciones y otras feministas, el término maternidad es uno maleable. Y a mí me parece que por ahí va su aportación. Maleable. Es uno maleable de gran porosidad conceptual. Y puede ser activado tanto por las estructuras del patriarcado, en este caso el Estado, para establecer hegemonía, y por los grupos de mujeres para resistir los embates del patriarcado y logran conquistar derechos para sí. Así que la pregunta es, ¿cómo conceptualiza este modelo? Viendo que otros han utilizado esas nociones, pero ha habido unos cambios, ¿verdad? Esto es sencillamente ideas patriarcales, o esto a su vez es una forma de resistencia que produce avances en las conquistas de las mujeres en la política. No sé, pregunta. Tercer punto. Las gobernadoras provinciales eran educadas y de clase alta. Fue la caracterización que se nos ha provisto, ¿verdad? De familias respetables, vinculadas a la política y de reputación moral intachable. ¿Había diferencias raciales entre las gobernadoras? Para mí fue bien hermoso ver las fotos. Y vi ya las fotos, y aunque las fotos, es verdad, como bien nos señala Elizabeth, la resolución no es buena, pero yo misma estaba y digo, bueno, qué interesante, ¿verdad? Qué diversidad había ahí. Ciertamente hay una gran diversidad fenotípica ahí, ¿verdad? Uno tiene que entrarse ahí. ¿Había diferencias raciales entre las gobernadoras? De ser así, ¿qué impacto tenían estas diferencias raciales en la incorporación de las mujeres a las estructuras gubernamentales y a los accesos que tenían, ¿verdad?, a las diferentes agencias gubernamentales y hasta el mismo Balaguer? Es importante entender, me parece a mí, las formas en que las mujeres en posiciones políticas van forjando lazos de apoyo y solidaridad entre ellas. ¿Cuáles eran las relaciones de género, raza y clase entre las gobernadoras? ¿Cómo se daba la rivalidad y la competencia entre gobernadoras que buscaban recursos del Estado para sus proyectos? Me parece importante para entender la solidaridad entre mujeres que ocupan posiciones políticas, o para entender cómo las mujeres se pueden socavar unas a otras en el proceso de la política. Póngalo de los dos lados. Finalmente, entre las vivencias de las gobernadoras se relatan momentos difíciles de intimidación y violencia física contra la dignidad de estas, ¿verdad?, en el desempeño de su trabajo. Estas agresiones eran denunciadas a la policía, pero parece ser que no eran atendidas adecuadamente, o por lo menos no eran atendidas en los parámetros, ¿verdad?, que uno pudiera pensar ante una mujer que entran a su casa y le dicen que la van a matar, ¿verdad? O que la intimidan y le dicen palabras soeces en el desempeño de su trabajo. Estas agresiones, pues, me parece sí que no eran entendidas. ¿Cómo el Estado balaguerista manejaba la violencia política a la cual las gobernadoras estaban expuestas? Después de todo, eran mujeres que eran leales al partido y fieles al mandatario. ¿Cómo manejaban eso? Con estas preguntas yo los dejo, pero sin antes, ¿verdad? Vuelvo a felicitar a la doctora Manley porque esto es una aportación a un nuevo espacio de investigación en el campo del género y del poder político.
Aprovecho para felicitar a ambas, porque el comentario de la doctora Acevedo habrá muchas interrogantes también. Si tú quieres comentar algo de lo que ella dijo. Sí, sí, claro.
Well, first I want to say thank you so very much for those very kind comments, and it really is my goal to sort of help start rethinking some of the ways that we understand women in politics, or at least that we sort of get into it, right? That we start to do the kind of investigations within Latin America and the Caribbean without forgetting the forebears and the work that has gone before. You know, your mention of Helen Safa or Rosario Espinal, right? Very important work. But that there's much more to be done. And just the evidence that people, mostly men, would say, you don't need to study them. They're not worth it. Nothing happened. But I go back to this picture, and this is not a governor, but this is Emma Balaguer, who was Joaquin's sister, who ran a program called the Cruzada de Amor, which is a huge charitable organization. And this is, as much physical as metaphorical. She was right there, right, throughout his regime. And she made a lot of decisions, and she was not to be messed with. She was very intense, as were these other women that filled the positions of governors or international representatives. I could go on with a lot of these stories that have been hidden and really deserve the light of day. I want to sort of quickly touch base on your last three questions, if I can, or at least kind of touch in on them, because I think that they're important. I do think this issue of women and power, right, that it is not, these women are not engaging in roles that are considered particularly powerful. And so what they're doing is finding new nodes of power, creating new nodes of power, and that we need to kind of reassess what power looks like as part of this. This is really an important point that you make, and worth looking at many other women, elected, not elected, appointed. I am fascinated by and plan to do more research on Doña Felisa Rincón de Gautier, right, who serves as mayor here in San Juan. Even if those positions of power are not so formally understood or traditional kinds of power, that we often see different routes to authority and influence within women. Which kind of brings me to this other question of how do we understand their roles? Is this another form of patriarchy? Is this feminist? And I guess my cheat answer is it's both, right? In some ways, these women are advancing, they wouldn't have called themselves feminists, but they are advancing possibilities for women. And they are, whether they wanted to admit it or not. And they were also supporting a patriarchal structure. And so I think, again, I keep returning to paradoxes, but I can't seem to help myself that they're both kind of running at the same time. And we have to have room for that gray and that give and take, and that's really important. Finally, and this is definitely a sort of weak point. There were a lot of differences between these women. I'll go back to that kind of shoddy picture, but there were differences in age, there were differences in marital status, there were differences in race and racial self-identification, and I haven't done enough with that. Like that just, I need to do more. I get the sense that at least regionally there was some solidarity, that they had kind of regional collectives, that they would meet together and they would travel to the capital together. But I do think there were ones that were more favored. I know that Doña V of La Romana was more favored, in part because she had one of the hardest provinces, right? And she managed to stay in that position for 12 years, and she was definitely more favored. Like, I could tell that. But I would love to get in to kind of get at more who was favored and why. Some of it I think was just, were you a good ass kisser? Like, could you get in there and really, tell Balaguer what he wanted to hear? He was a little vain. But I think that those levels of access are important. And I guess finally, in terms of managing political violence, they weren't good at it. They tried to push it under the rug, ignore it, many argue that the 12 años was more violent than all of the Trujillo years put together, minus the Haitian massacre, because of the disappearances. And so I think in many ways that level of political violence is part of the downfall, and something I'd like to look at more. The Balaguer period is vastly understudied, particularly in terms of gender. And there's a fascinating book called Las Viudas de los 12 años that looks at the women who resisted or who were widowed by the regime, but many of them end up becoming hugely important political feminist activist figures, like Gladys Gutierrez and a number of others. So there's a whole lot more there to do that I haven't arrived at yet, and I'm working on. But thank you so much, and I think we're going to open for questions, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. I think they want to say that.
I want to thank you for the work, and I can't wait to read the book at some point. I have many questions about the research behind and later the writing, but there is not much time. My mind is not too coherent right now. So I would like to know, what was your experience with the interviews that you had with the women that were still alive?
Yeah, I was only able to interview a few of them. A woman from Santiago, from La Romana, and then a woman named Rosita Fadul, who served as a governor later in the 80s when Balaguer returned to the presidency. Those were the three that I did. They talked so fondly of their time. They had been so honored. I couldn't pull out of them any of the negative, even though I knew for a fact that, each of them had faced these particularly difficult challenges to their role. They didn't seem to want to remember that. Doña Villi had still a picture of Balaguer in her living room when I interviewed her. It was still up there, and so they were still kind of staunchly Balaguerista, and they were, very much like, there's a phrase, I think, I don't know whether this translates to Spanish, but within a lot of women's history, it had to be done, so I did it. Right, and that's kind of how they saw, like, he appointed me, and so I didn't really know what I was doing, and I just did it, and we needed to create peace, and that's kind of how their responses were, and they were similar. Rosita Fadul is the third one I mentioned, who was a later. She is a whole other personaje. And she is a study in and of itself that needs to be done, because there are many mythical stories about her refusal to be a proper lady, I shall say, within meetings with difficult female officials. I won't go into details, but she apparently broke up a number of meetings in very unsavory ways. And so she's a whole other case, but she was fascinating as well.
You mentioned the violence of the 12 años, which one knows it was a very bloody period. No governor, no female governor ever intervened in that aspect. In La Romana, you mentioned La Romana as a particular violent one. And La Romana, the violence came from the union. The trade union was very, very well organized. And being a company town, a sugar town, everyone knew each other. So the female governor was from La Romana, so she knew everyone there. Did she intervene with the sugar company? It was managed by Cubans, ex-Cubans at that time. Did she intervene with the party, Balaguer?
I've seen evidence of her intervening in what they called Red La Romana, right, because of the presence of unions and a strong presence, a strong resistance to Balaguer. I found evidence that she intervened in school strikes, not in labor strike. It doesn't mean she didn't, but it doesn't necessarily mean she did. In the case, and this happened in other provinces as well, that somehow that they were okay to intervene in school strikes, which were undoubtedly political also, but also about resources, that they were willing to kind of step into that world, but I'm not sure that they were willing to step into labor disputes or other kinds of political, kind of intense political fighting, unless it was involved themselves, unless it was an attack on their persons. Again, it's something I would want to go back and look more carefully at, but at the end of the day, they were Balaguerista, right? And they were not, they were conservative. And that idea that, you're adopting, Rosario's point that he knew they were, oh yes, they were very conservative, right? But they weren't so conservative as to be 100% party aligned all the time. They knew that, if the party line was not supporting this road and they needed this road, they were going to get this road, whether or not the government was bringing the money, and they were going to find it some other way. So they weren't 100%, just following completely, but they were pretty, they weren't I don't see them. I don't imagine them stepping in to, say, a labor dispute. But I can't 100% say.
In terms of your sources, did you see the archives of each province? So you saw the correspondence with Balaguer, but also outed them internally with the different issues.
I know that they met regionally. I got the correspondence from every province for every year from 68 to 78. Now, sometimes those pieces, 66 to 78. Sometimes those pieces were incomplete. You'd get one side of the conversation and not the other. And within those, I got the sense that they talked to each other, but not what they were talking about, right? That each region was talking to each other, but not what they were talking about. And I have the majority of their annual reports that they submitted to the government. So it's not a 100% complete, but it's pretty extensive what they have. And it's a stash of documents that I want to go back to and kind of relook at, because I wanted to get, here's the overall picture. This is important to the big story from Trujillo to late 70s, but there's so much more nuance in there that I would like to dig out. Yeah.
Your sources. When you were looking at these documents where these women are transmitting what they felt were the needs of the provincias, did you felt that there's a big difference among them all? Or are they all asking for the same kinds of projects or support?
There was a lot of similarity in what they were asking for, and a lot of it, again, are those basics. And schools and roads and dams, but each of them had a lot of them had a little pet project. You know, they'd have a sewing center, or they'd have in Barahona there was a maternity hospital that was really important to her. They each kind of had like their little pet projects or their particular concerns, and the different provinces would have, you know, La Romana, she'd be reporting on, you know, problems more often than, I don't know, certain other provinces that were chiller, more calm. The woman in Samana was interested in tourism development, where others were like, that was not a concern for them. But their language was eerily, like someone had sat them down and been like, and someone in some ways did, you know, there were programs through the League of Women Voters that they did and the OEF. There was some, how do you be democratic, but they eerily sometimes similar in the way that they knew how to ask for things, and I think that goes back to the Trujillo in some ways.
What we were trying to say then is that after all, these gobernadoras, they knew exactly what to say to the state.
They knew what buttons to press, right? They did know. You know, they didn't always get what they wanted, but they knew how to tell Balaguer, like, pay attention. This is important to you because voting, because party support. And so they were good at getting that stuff out and gathering resources from other places as well, right, from locally.
They managed to use the threat of using votes in order to get the attention of the president.
And peace and stability also, yeah. Well, thank you so much again for attending and to putting up these polls.
Thank you to Dr. Elizabeth Manley for a very enlightening lecture, and to the commentator, Alba de Acevedo, for a very provocative comment. It has been a pleasure to have Elizabeth Manley at the Institute. You know that you are welcome anytime you want. Thank you very much.